Hello, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to the Iron Purpose podcast. This is episode 5, where I got the opportunity and the pleasure to interview UFC fighter in the Bantamweight division, Cody Renegade Gibson. He gave up some of his time today to chat with me, answer some of my questions, where we dug into his life, his fighting career, where it all started, his time as a teacher, and why he got into teaching and how that affects the generations below him for years to come. We also get into his time and his experience as a father of 3 little kiddos. And just about when we were getting into that, we had to wrap it up, and I'll let you guys watch to see kind of how it ended. It was kind of full circle. We got to see the fighter version of Cody Gibson, the teacher version of Cody Gibson, and it wrapped up with family version of Cody Gibson. It was a beautiful conversation, and I am so blessed and excited to have had the opportunity to speak with him. This is episode 5 of the Iron Purpose podcast, featuring Cody the Renegade Gibson. Stay sharp, everybody. All right, everybody. I have UFC fighter Cody Gibson with me today. Cody, thank you so much for being here. How you doing, man?
Doing well. It's Thanksgiving break, so my kids are out of school, and me and my wife are both off work 'cause we both work for the school district. So yeah, just trying to get some projects done around the house, but it's a little bit hard to do with 3 kids in the house. So
And you took the time to come on this in the middle of all that, man. That's awesome. I appreciate
well,
that.
sometimes you got to get away. This is a great excuse.
Love it. Cool. So what you been up to lately, other than working, and obviously just getting out of a fight here not too long ago. What's life kind of looking like right now for Cody?
Just kind of getting back in the swing of things with work, managing work and training, and back to that balance. And I mean, I'm not in a fight camp, so it's not as challenging. But I want to stay consistent in the gym and be making improvements. So I got to be diligent there, and so I've just been back to that. And yeah, I got a week off here, and so we got to go back. I think we go back for 3 weeks, and then we're on Christmas break. So it's
My goodness.
pretty easy schedule this semester for me because I had so much time off. And the last part of school, you could during that October, November months, you have a lot of just five days a week, Monday through Friday, no Monday holiday, and it's just the teachers kind of you could tell they're needing a break, and so I felt I got back to work after my fight, and I was all rejuvenated and felt great. And I'm looking around at the other teachers, and they're all like on their last legs, so
Just dogging it.
yeah, just hanging in there and counting down the days. So yeah, so it's been good.
That's awesome, man. So for those who don't know who Cody Gibson is, would you be able to kind of just give a little about yourself? Like I said, it can be as deep as you want, go as far back as you want, and then just kind of bring us to where you are now. So whatever you got, man. The floor is
Yeah,
yours.
I mean, so I grew up in California, Central Valley. So like they call that the armpit of California because nobody wants to live there.
We've got a couple of those in Minnesota.
I mean, I like the Valley. It's it's an affordable place to live. I don't live there anymore. I moved about 4 years ago to the Central Coast.
Okay.
The Central Coast is like, everyone thinks of California as Los Angeles or the Bay Area. Those are the 2 places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a ginormous state. And the Central Coast is kind of the hidden gem, I feel like, of the state, where there's a lot of bumper stickers or car signs that say "Not L.A., not the Bay." Very proud of the 805 heritage. And so yeah, I moved here about 4.5 years ago, and yeah, it's kind of the hidden gem. It's not too crowded. It's a lot of like sleepy beach towns, and yeah, it's San Luis Obispo County. That's is the county we're in, and so everyone calls it slow, SLO, slow, and it kind of has that slow vibe too. The various little beach towns and stuff. It's very laid back, flannel and flip flops kind of people. So
love that.
I like it out here. It's nice and quiet and good place to raise kids. So it's been good. And So yeah, I moved out here about 4.5 years ago. But got into combat sports from a pretty young age. Started wrestling. I actually didn't start wrestling until I was a freshman in high school. Um, so a little bit late into wrestling, but uh, once I found it, man, I just fell in love with it.
Mm.
Stopped playing every other sport and just did it year round, and it really saved me in a lot of ways. I was getting into a lot of trouble, getting suspended a lot, hanging around the wrong people, and getting to, kind of grew up skateboarding. So if you know anything about that kind of culture, and especially in
Mm-hmm.
the 90s, it was like you're gonna get introduced to a lot of things, and in that kind of environment. And so I was getting into a lot of fights and getting suspended a lot, and didn't really have any direction. And so wrestling kind of gave me something. And so that I feel like was kind of what changed the trajectory for me, and I just fell in love with the sport, and became obsessed with it. And because I started so late, I knew I had a lot of catching up to do. I'm wrestling guys that have been on the mat since they were 5, 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and the town I grew up in is about 45 minutes south of Clovis, California, and Clovis is like one of the best wrestling towns in the nation. Several high schools are ranked top 10 nationally every year.
Wow.
And so it's like this little kind of rich suburb community of Fresno, but it's like the people that live in this town, like they've got it dialed in as far as like their youth program, and it's all like it's pretty impressive, but they've got the resources as well to make it happen. So
Mm-hmm.
growing up so close to such a powerhouse in wrestling, and you see what the top level looks like just down the road, and so it was easy to want to beat those guys. And I was like the poor kid from the wrestling, a school that wasn't known for wrestling, and didn't have like a long history of like state champs or anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
just that like mentality, that kind of like I want to beat these guys, I want to prove these guys wrong. And that was just kind of my mentality from the get-go, and with wrestling, and I think that's kind of carried over into fighting. And
For sure.
so yeah, I wrestled through high school, and then I wrestled in college for 5 years, and uh, started fighting actually while I was still wrestling in college. Um, I would come home in the summertime and crash it with my brother at his apartment or wherever he was living, and crash on the couch or whatever for the summer. And one of my old high school buddies was going to a gym and training, and next thing I knew, I was in the cage like a week after I started. It
Dang.
was a very different era, of fighting, and this was in early mid or 2008. I think I made my debut, so it was
Okay.
just a different era, and I think I went and trained like 2 or 3 times, and then the next week they threw me in there for my first pro fight. So
Wow.
um,
And how'd that go?
it went good. I mean, what was funny was, my first pro fight, I was fighting a guy who had like 17 fights, but he had a pretty bad record. And so I almost felt like, knowing, like, had it been a guy that was 0-0, I had no idea who he was. That would have been a little bit more nerve wracking. But like, no, there's data to support that this guy's not good at this. Like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
so like it kind of like helped me like ease my nerves a little bit. I feel like I was like, and I didn't really know how to fight. I've been in a lot of fights. I like to fight,
Sure.
but I was a wrestler. Like that was what I told myself going into it. I was like, I'm gonna go out and have fun and swing like I would in the streets. And if it's not going well, if I'm getting my ass kicked, at least I know I could blast double this guy and probably win the fight that way.
Right.
So yeah, it went well, and that's really how I did the first 3 fights I had. It was always like summertime, um, you know, just something to do in the summer to make $500 or whatever. But I didn't really like train like at a established gym with like trainers that knew what they were talking about or anything. Um, and I didn't really think anything of it. I literally just thought of it like they're paying me to do something I would do for free,
Mm-hmm.
and they're giving me a few $100 to do it. So I was like, I didn't really think like this is long term what I want to do or anything. It just, I was still wrestling in college and doing all that, and it was just something to do. And then after I got out of school is when and I was a little disappointed in myself. I had some years in college where I was super dedicated and dialed in with the wrestling, and then I had some years where I just wasn't really. I didn't really want to do it. I just kind of was more preoccupied with what was going on Friday night, and stuff like that, and just didn't have the commitment that I needed, and so I was. But when I graduated, when I got done wrestling and got out of school, I was like just disappointed in myself. Like I
Mm-hmm.
knew I would have moments during my seasons where I would beat the returning national champ, and then I would have moments where I lost to like a third stringer, because it just there was no consistency because I didn't have consistency in my own life. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's really what kind of drove me to want to continue athletically after college. Like I just felt like I didn't give my best effort and
Mm-hmm.
something didn't sit right with me. So then I started training, actually learning how to fight and learning jiu-jitsu, and um, I didn't go to like a gym that had like a mixed martial arts gym. I went to a jiu-jitsu gym to learn jiu-jitsu, and I went to a boxing gym and boxed with all the boxers, and I went to a Muay Thai gym to do Muay Thai with all these Muay Thai fighters, but
Wow.
it wasn't like one stop all kind of thing, and it was a lot of piecing it together and trying to learn not only learn the various martial arts, but then also how does it apply when you wear 4-ounce gloves in a cage.
Right.
It's very different um, than boxing gloves, or even Thai. How you stand in a Thai fight is going to be very different than how you stand in a mixed martial arts fight. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of trial and error and trying to piece that together. And but that's how most of my career was at smaller gyms and just kind of piecing it together. And then um, yeah, I've had a long career, man. It's been shit. A lot of years, 18,
Yeah.
17 years, something like that. I start from when I started, so 16, 17 years. So
Wow.
still on the journey. It seems like it's
Absolutely.
never ending.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I love it. I love. I think too, as I get older, you start to realize like that it's gonna end. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
gonna come. I mean, my wife is a college basketball player, and so she's been out of school now for 14 years. And she talks about it all the time. Like, man, that you just can't fill that void.
Mm-hmm.
That competitive drive, that that thing that gets you up in the morning, gets you excited, and she was like, "You're lucky that you still have that, like in a different way than wrestling." But it's like, and so I am grateful for my ability to have longevity and still be in the sport. And yeah, I'm just trying to soak it in because I do know like the day's gonna come to an end, in the next few years. So
Right.
trying to enjoy this last ride while I have it.
Absolutely. It's interesting because you said after school you kind of what motivated you to go forward was looking back and not leaving it all on the court, so to speak. But what a complete 180 going from maybe not caring as much to all of a sudden now you're picking all these different places to try to pull everything together to get your one tool belt of everything you can use when you're in the out there in the arena. And I'm sure that wasn't cheap either at the time. Were you paying memberships to each one of these gyms too to try to fight, or were they taking in anybody at that time?
No, it was either I was paying memberships or like a percentage of the fight, like a
Oh, gotcha,
percentage of
gotcha.
the fight purse. So it just depends on what I worked out with everybody. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it was. I think for me, it was a unique way to come up in the sport because a lot of guys will, there were several times I thought maybe I'll just move to Sacramento and train at Alpha Male, or maybe I'll move down to LA and train at X Gym, Y Gym, whatever. Right? There's a lot of gyms that have a lot of fighters, and yeah, it just never worked out for me that way. I finally made the move to an actual fight team about 4.5 years ago, and so I train at the Pit, which is a very storied gym. Chuck Liddell, and not just Chuck, but Glover Teixeira and Tim Kennedy, Jake
Okay.
Shields. A lot of these guys came from this area and this team, and obviously they branched out to other places. Some of them branched out to other places and stuff. But yeah, it's been that's my fight nickname or whatever is the Renegade, and to me like my trajectory in the sport has kind of resembled that whole message of like doing things your own way and not following some blueprint that's been laid out, but like having to learn as you go. And I think a part of it too is just when I came up in the sport, it was a very different time. There wasn't a lot of structure and guidance and people to talk to, or even just resources like the internet, like weren't as prevalent. It wasn't as easy to get information on the internet like it is today.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. It blows my mind. Like some of the YouTube channels, you could just learn all these techniques, and like I'm like, no matter where you come from, like you could literally learn high level technique and then just apply it in your gym. Obviously, it's not quite as good as if the person was there, but
Right.
like you got Gordon Ryan showing you a front choke. It's like how much people pay for seminars of that stuff.
You got it right here in your living room.
Yeah, it's wild, but it's just
Yeah.
different. It's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. So take me through like so when you started getting to come up, when did you start to realize, okay, I think I'm pretty good at this? Because you said you kind of started out just kind of spraying and praying, try to get a win, and then leading on your wrestling if you got to that point. But when was it like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm actually kind of pretty good at this? When did the UFC kind of start to go in, like come into the scene? And did you do any other organizations before going to the UFC?
Oh yeah, a lot of regional shows and casinos, and we have a casino near where I grew up called Tachi Palace, and that's where the WEC actually started.
Hmm.
So the WEC's home was the Tachi Palace for many years until they eventually kind of grew and based themselves out of San Jose, Sacramento kind of areas. But so a lot of the guys like Nate Diaz, Uriah Faber, all those guys came up at the Tachi Palace.
Okay.
It was just called the WEC, but when the WEC left, Tachi Palace Fights started, and it took over Palace Fighting Championships. So it's a couple name changes, but the promotion had been around. Fighting in that city and that casino had been around for a long time and had a long history. And at one time, um, especially 125s. At one time, the Tachi Palace Fights had the best 125ers in the world.
Hmm.
When the UFC didn't have the weight class, it was bringing in guys from Japan and Ian McCall and all these high level UFC guys. Juicier Formega, Alex Perez. There's just like tons of high level UFC level guys that were all fighting out of there. So it was good to come up out of that promotion because um, there was stiff competition from early on where I was fighting guys that were being imported from Vegas or this guy from here, and like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just fighting your like local guys. It was like they were bringing in guys that, and you were sometimes the local guy. They knew you'd sell tickets, but you were there to lose, and so it kind of gave me a little bit more to like again prove them wrong, and um, but I mean that was to me like if you look at like a fight career, especially nowadays, like with the Contender Series and everything,
Mm-hmm.
they're incentivizing going undefeated early in your career. They're incentivizing getting a lot of finishes early in your career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know how many times on the Contender Series this guy's 8-0 with 7 finishes or 8-0 with 8 first round finishes, and I know that looks great, but like there's something to be said about having ups and downs early in your career and learning like wow, there's levels to this jujitsu stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
cage wrestling is a little different than collegiate wrestling, and I got to learn some stuff here, and just kind of going through those bumps and up those trials, and I don't know. I feel like it kind of shaped me a little bit in a way that prepared me for the next stage of MMA, which is the highest level that maybe wouldn't have had I been like on cloud nine, 8-0 with 8 first round finishes. Like, who you fighting is the next question I always have.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
So speaking of, kind of bumps and ups and downs and adversity and the grind, so there came a point where you were in the UFC, and then there came a point where they wanted to part ways. They no longer wanted to be in a partnership with you. How did that make you feel in that moment? And what was kind of your mentality at that time?
I mean, it was just, I had 4 fights in the UFC from 2014 to 15. Um, I lost a close decision to Aljamain Sterling in the first one. and obviously it was his debut as well, so we didn't know what he was gonna, go on to be champion. I knew he was good, a good
Mm-hmm.
grappler, um, but I didn't know necessarily how good he was gonna get. And then I won a fight, and then I was winning my third fight against Manny Gambarian. I had knocked him down a few times, was pretty much in control of that fight. Got myself caught in a scramble and choked. And then with 1 second left in the second round, and so that was a learning experience. Like, you're never safe in a fight, like,
Mm-hmm.
especially against guys that are dangerous and have weapons. Like, everything could be going perfectly smooth, and you feel like you're in complete control, and all it takes is one bad decision in a scramble, and then the next thing you lose. And then in my fourth and final fight in the UFC, they sent me down to Brazil to fight Douglas Silva de Andrade, tough Brazilian guy. He was like 22-1 at the time, and it was a close fight. But if you're gonna fight a Brazilian in Brazil, you gotta really win.
Right.
It can't be a toss up. And so when that I lost that fight by decision, and then that was the end of it. And I just remember telling myself, like, I had definitely poured myself into it. I didn't have a big team around me, um, but I had people that cared around me. So, sometimes you see these big gyms and you can get lost in the glitz and the glamour and the stars that are there. And um, I've trained at big gyms, I've trained at small gyms, and one of the advantages of coming from a smaller places is your coaches are 100% invested in you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you go to some of these mega gyms, like, you're lucky to get any one-on-one instruction.
Right.
You're there as another body in the sparring room. If you keep showing up and you show discipline, you might start getting more attention, but it's nothing's guaranteed. At least that's my experiences. And so I was disappointed, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I knew I had done my best, at the time. And
Mm.
so I was like, not really, it wasn't the same as like college wrestling where I was disappointed in my effort. It was like,
Right.
no, I put in the effort, I invested all myself into this, and it didn't pan out. And so I told myself after I got released, I started teaching full time as soon as I got released, I picked up a teaching job. It just worked out where in the year it was into the summer, beginning of the school year. So I jumped on and started teaching full time. And I told myself I'm going to go back to the regional scene. And if I win out, if I go undefeated and get back to the UFC, then great. If I lose along the way, then I'll just know it's time to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. And I won quite a few in a row and won a title. And it was right around the same time that Conor McGregor had just become the double champ.
Okay.
So everybody was trying to, like, talking about this idea of being a double champ and how much attention that drew. And so I won the title for the Tachi Palace fights, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna go up a weight class and I'm gonna go be a double champ because that'll get me back to the UFC. Like.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out. I lost the fight at 145s, and I retired. And I was like, I'm done. This is what I said I was gonna do,
Wow.
and I lost along my climb or my way back. And so, yeah, I retired. I was like, I'm done doing it. I just started coaching wrestling and teaching full time, and that was it. And it was about a year where I didn't really train. I was just busy coaching, um, and then I just started once wrestling season ended, like the high school wrestling season. So my coaching season ended. I just started finding myself hitting up jujitsu once or twice a week, and then that turned into staying after for some kickboxing, and then it turned into, yeah, they need another body to spar with, so I'll go in and do that. And then by the time you're there every day, you're just like, well, if I'm putting in all this work, like, I might as well fight.
Uh-huh.
And so that was pretty much what brought me back. Is just like I just kept finding myself back in the gym constantly. And so then I said, "Damn, I'm gonna come back and fight." And at this time, I had just had my first child, my daughter, and so I didn't really know what to expect or what to think of it. I was just like, I just have an urge to continue to fight. And so I had one fight for the LFA. It was a main event for the LFA, And I fought this Brazilian guy who was like 22-2, some crazy record. They're bringing this guy up. So some young up and coming guy, and he was like a really good Thai fighter, but not the best grappler. And so I was like able to win the fight. It was not a good performance. It was my first time really balancing working full time and training full time and trying to balance that.
And
And
being a new dad.
and being a new dad, and
Yeah.
yeah, and so I didn't have a great performance, but I was able to win the fight. And I remember as soon as that fight ended, it was an LFA main event, so I was pretty stoked. Like, all right, there's some traction.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I was thinking, man, I'm gonna keep it going. I'm gonna invest back into this and really use this as a springboard. And then COVID hit, so and that's when everything shut down. Um and actually I take that back. It was before, so I had that fight, and then it was 2019, and I had tore my shoulder. I had to have labrum surgery. That was like a 6-month recovery, and I had torn my bicep and had to have surgery and a shorter recovery, but still, it was just a year of injuries. And so then after those injuries is when I was like, all right, I had, I made a comeback. These injuries set me back, a year, but 2020 is gonna be my year, man. I'm gonna be 3 fights, 4 fights. I'm gonna be back at it, and that's when COVID hit, and so it was a double whammy because not only did I miss 2020 and 2021, but 19 as well because of all those injuries. So yeah, I don't know. At that point, um, it was a rough time. That was a
Mm-hmm.
rough time. I look back at some videos I've seen, and it's like gained a bunch of weight, and I mean maybe that was everybody during COVID, but
All right. Yeah.
I just didn't look healthy. I was drinking too much, and just wasn't things weren't going good. And my wife was a nurse, so she was still going to work all the time, and myself as a teacher obviously was not. And so it was me and my kids, and just hanging out with them all day and trying to manage online teaching. And I just was a rough time. And then obviously the fighting stuff that was non-existent. Um, and then that's when I made the move. I said, I need a change of scenery. I need a change of pace. And then my wife's family had slowly moved out this way to the coast. And so we'd always come to visit, and I'd always say, "Wouldn't it be cool if we could live out here?" And so I started applying for jobs, and then was able to land a job teaching AP history. And so we made the move and been here ever since. And so coming here to San Luis Obispo area really rejuvenated my career, because I was training with a new team at a new gym, and I got busy, started fighting, 3, 4 times a year. I was really going out and trying to find the biggest names I could find.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and fought John Dodson, and I went and fought Ray Borg and Francisco Rivera, and just trying to find the highest quality guys I could fight so that I could get. I knew my age, and I was like, if I'm gonna get back to the UFC, it's gonna have to happen soon. And so I just went on kind of a rampage, just trying to get as many big fights as I could, and uh, put myself back in the conversation. And just when I felt like it was not going anywhere, like um, I had fought for Eagle FC, which is Khabib's promotion,
Mm-hmm.
and was really excited about that because not only was it a kind of a bigger show than your regional shows,
Sure.
it was in Miami, and it was just a cool thing. Um, but they paid pretty dang good, um, for non UFC. You're not going to find much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed like a 4 fight deal with them, and was taking, maybe if the UFC, I'm too old for the UFC now, but here's a good opportunity to get some good paydays and still be relevant. And then the war with Ukraine started, and that's what kind of killed Eagle FC, at least in the United States. They no longer had shows in the United States after that. And so then I went back to a smaller show in LA, and fought Francisco Rivera, who's an OG, like used to be a top 10 bantamweight back in the day, and
Mm-hmm.
won the title for them down there, and was kind of just like, it wasn't much money, and I was like looking at my wife and soon to be 3 kids, and we haven't had a third, and I was like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth our time for me to be going to work all day, leaving before, at 5 a.m. So you've got to do all the morning routine because I'm gone at the gym. And then I work all day. And then after work, I got another 2 or 3 hours of training. It was just, and I was
Jeez.
just like, it's just not worth it for $3,000, like it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make any sense. And so I was really at a point where I was like, maybe I just hang him up, like I got nothing to prove. I've beaten some big name guys outside the organization, outside the UFC. Um, I was just tired of fighting for a few grand, uh, and that's when the Ultimate Fighter presented itself, and um, just so happened to be doing it at my weight class, and the theme of the show was veterans against prospects. So, I mean, things line up in life weird sometimes like that, where you're like, the stars align perfectly, and so yeah, I've been on that roller coaster ever since, I guess.
Yeah, that's crazy. So did you have to apply for the Ultimate Fighter, or did they kind of? What's the process with that?
I mean, it's changed. I've gone for not the tough. What season was I on? 32,
Was it 31?
31. I've got the poster thing right here. It'll tell me. Check this thing out.
Oh, that's sick.
This
What
is
is that?
one of the guys on the show, Mondo
Uh-huh. Yep.
Gutierrez. He's a multifaceted guy. He's a barber. He's an artist, graffiti artist kind of guy, tagging stuff. And so he asked the producers for a bunch of art supplies so he could make kind of a memorial for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so he drew this up, and then he had everybody sign it. Like McGregor's on here, Chandler, coaches, and then all the
Wow.
fighters. And then he went and got it after the show was over. He went and got copies of it and sent us these. So we each have one of these. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yes, it was tough 31. That was what I was looking at. Yeah, I mean, I had tried out for the Ultimate Fighter way back in the day. The year that Chris Holdsworth won the show. Um, and Davey Grant was on that season, I believe. And yeah, that's who Chris Holdsworth beat in the finals, I think. But anyway, and I had made it all the way through the tryouts, the different stages of the tryouts, all the way to where they kept me in Vegas for a week to do medicals, and you're going to be on the show. And I mean, there were thousands of guys that converged in Vegas for these tryouts from all over
Mm-hmm.
the world. It was insane. I'm like, dude, I drove like 6 hours to get here. Like, there's dudes from Ireland, from literally all over the world coming to try out for the show.
Wow.
And anyway, I was sent home with the under the illusion that I was on the show. They just done a week's worth of medicals on me to prepare for the show. It was going to start in 6 weeks or whatever. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go home and have a training camp, and then be ready to do the show. Um, and then I was sitting in a classroom. I was a substitute teacher at the time, and I just get a text from a random 702 Vegas number, and it's like, hey, you're an alternate, but you're not going to be on the show. And I was so bummed, and I ended up getting signed to the UFC after that, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, so then this time around, they just contacted me and said, hey, we're interested in you to be
Wow.
on this show. And so then I reached out to my management to make sure everything was legit. We did an interview, a Zoom interview, and then at first they said no. At first they said you didn't make it. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't make it. I was like, go find me an American bantamweight who's done more outside of the UFC, a veteran of the UFC. I was like, this is bullshit. Like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and I was pissed. Like, there's no way I'm not getting on this show, And then they came back a few days later and they said, never mind, you're on the show. So it worked out. So, but then even when we came to Vegas, to start the show, I had already worked things out with my job, and like, okay, I'm gonna be gone for 7 weeks. Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
gonna have a cell phone or any electronics to do
Oh, that's
anything.
right. Yeah.
Um, and so I worked everything out with work. And when we get to Vegas, we find out that there's there's more of us than there that are gonna be on the show. They had kind of structured things so you got to Vegas, you stayed in a hotel, did all of your medicals, and yeah, they started cutting guys, and you would hear them in their hotels. Like there was a dude, Anthony Burchak. Uh, he fought in the UFC for a while, Arizona guy, wrestler guy, and he was in the room next to me, and I just hear like, "Oh, f this!" F they starts getting all mad, and they're telling him no thanks, and so that was a nerve wracking
Oh
week,
my
just
goodness.
trying to wonder if I'm actually going to be on the show. And once it was all said and done, I was. So uh, yeah, it was just a wild experience. Just the mental part of getting to the actual filming. Like people don't quite grasp how much mental stuff happened just to get to that day. That first
Mm-hmm.
day. So
Right. That's crazy. And when you got in there, when you were kind of lined up waiting for the coaches to pick, had you kind of had an idea what was going to happen? Maybe what team you're going to be on or what team you wanted to be on? And what was that experience like?
yeah, I mean, I kind of was leaning. I wanted to be on Michael Chandler's team, um, only because I knew Connor to some extent. Like we had the same manager for a long time, and had fought on a couple cards with him, and so I kind of knew him a little bit, or at least had been around him enough. And I just wasn't my type of guy. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously you respect the things he's done in the sport,
For
but
sure. Yeah.
I just and then by this time of the show, he's already been away for so long, and I don't know. You just don't know. And so I was like, I want to be on Chandler's team, and so it worked out. Because I was, uh, and yeah, I'm glad I was because McGregor's team was kind of a mess.
Yeah, that was so much fun to watch. I personally was kind of going through some stuff. Like I had mentioned to you, I was in law enforcement. I was a police officer for 3 years, and I had kind of got to a point where I was like, this maybe this isn't for me. And I was watching the McGregor. I think it was McGregor Poirier 2, the one when they came back, and Chandler fought on that card, and that's the first time I had seen him fight. And at that same time, I kind of was like, maybe I should try to get back into law enforcement. Long story short, now I'm working at the jail as a CO, and I've been able to continue on with that mentality of give it my best, give it my all, and not give up. And it's kind of cool because he was kind of one, he had been through a lot getting to his point where he got into the UFC and then knocked out Dan Hooker. That was the fight that I watched, and so to kind of start to follow him along with that, I've been really encouraged, kind of from a distance, being there and being with him at all. I know he's a very like mental mindset kind of guy. Were you able to pick up on any of that? Did you guys kind of mesh, being that you have a similar personality? You kind of strike me as a guy you've been through some stuff and you've been able to overcome it and kind of say, this is what I've overcome. I'm not letting anything get me down. Did you guys mesh in that way? And was he kind of inspiration to you in some ways?
Yeah, he gets a lot of stuff online for like, oh, it's a little cheesy, a little over the top with some of his motivational speaking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even necessarily disagree with it. It can get over the top, but when you get to know him, like he is a genuinely good guy, and he came on the show 100% invested in us as the fighters.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, my role is the coach, and my role is to, yeah, I'm here to like promote this idea of fighting Connor and all this stuff, but my job is to do everything I can to put you 8 guys in the best position I could put you in. And that's that. And he took it serious. He was so diligent about so many things. Um, and so having a guy like that in your corner, and then seeing what's on the other side and what's going on over there, and how the guys are coming home from their practices and not so thrilled about some things, and
Mm-hmm.
like I just knew this fortune. I was lucky and I was grateful to have the people I had there, and um, definitely picked up a lot from him about mentality, about just believing in yourself, like the confidence. He's confident. Like he actually is confident that he can do all the things he says he's gonna do. He wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say them. He wouldn't come out on Twitter a few days before his fight with Oliveira and said, essentially I'm gonna create magic in there, and like he's saying these things because not only is it positive reinforcement and affirmations, but he does believe he's gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said about that, like having just a devotion to something and a belief in something that I've tried to take from him because you know coming from smaller gyms and always being on the feeling like you're on the outside looking in, like in life and fighting and wrestling, uh, it's hard to have real confidence. So
Mm-hmm.
I did find that being around guys who are genuinely like, very confident people helps with my own confidence. Like I kind of can study them and see how they do things and like apply things.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. That's some really good stuff in there. I want to just touch back just on a couple things. So teaching. Had you always want to been a teacher? What was kind of the draw to that?
Yeah, I mean, I went to school. I was a history major. I love political science and anything in the social science kind of realm. I kind of always been really into, and even like philosophy and logic and like those sorts of classes, like anything like in any of those kind of even like economics is the hardest one for me because I hate math, but I do find it fascinating and learning about economics and
Mm-hmm.
so government, obviously, any of these kind of subjects, and so that's what I went to school for because that's what I was interested in, and that just kind of led me into teaching. And I knew I wanted to coach
Mm,
because the sport of wrestling changed my life.
absolutely.
And so when you feel like this sport saved me, and you're like, I just had since I got out of college, like I've got an idea in my head that like I've got to give this to other people, give
Mm,
this thing that was given to me, and it's my job to pass it to somebody else.
mm-hmm.
And so I knew I wanted to coach, and so it just kind of led me down the path to becoming a teacher, and uh, I started substitute teaching and was a wrestling coach, high school wrestling coach, and right out of college, and then I started enjoying substitute teaching and thinking about it more. And then the next thing I knew, I was back in school to get some more degrees so I could teach kids.
That's awesome, man. Did you so I'm sure you've seen Here Comes the Boom or like School of Rock.
Uh,
Did you did any parents ever call you as a history teacher saying why is little Johnny putting my cat in a guillotine? Like
no, I haven't.
none of
Like,
that.
I mean, I don't really focus on it too much at work, but most of the time, parents are super stoked and supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when they do, they'll ask questions or talk to you or tell you, "Hey, good job your last fight" or whatever. So usually, yeah, they've been pretty supportive, and for the kids, I just like I try to use it as like your one. I always try to recruit wrestlers. You know, like this little Johnny gets in a fight and gets suspended, and hey, you think you're a tough guy, dude? Come on, I'll teach you. We could go and learn how to be a tough guy. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's ways to learn how to do this, and there's some ways that are even like legal and in schools, and so I use it as a recruiting tool a lot of the time, and um, people always think like the kids have a like I, I don't know. Maybe I just don't see it, but because my coworkers will tell me like, oh, they have the kids really look up to you, and I'm like,
Mm,
I don't really see that. But most of the focus I put is on the kids. Like that's how I always approach my work. Is like when they ask me questions about fighting, I can answer their questions, but I always refer it or deflect it or spin it to be how can this be about you and what you're doing because at the end of the day, like I'm a public servant. Like I'm here to serve the public. I'm here to serve these kids,
mm,
and I think all teachers need to look at it that way. Like we are here. These are the people buying our product. Like if we were a for-profit company, like
right.
the customer is always right. Like that old like we're here to work for them. So I try
Mm-hmm.
to like use it as something that as a tool more than anything else about what I've learned from the sport, about overcoming adversity, about you know I think there's a great the road to success, the road to what you're after is never just a straight line. It's always like ups and downs and ups and downs and big, obstacles in the way.
Absolutely.
And so kids have to learn how to be resilient.
Mm.
Like they have to, because there is no trajectory that's straight up.
Right.
Like you're not going to just go do it and it's going to be easy and you're going to become a millionaire and you're famous or whatever your goal is, right? Like it's not just going to be an easy path up. Or
Right.
at least maybe it will. I want to meet those people.
You and me both, man. And that's
But for
awesome.
most of us, it's not. And so
Right.
kids need resiliency in order to deal with that adversity and be able to get up when they fall down. And
Mm.
so that's something else I always kind of keep in the back of my head, is teaching that trait of being resilient.
It's beautiful, and it's cool to have that mentality, because it's like you don't have to be a therapist or a pastor or a physical fitness trainer. Even it's just taking your experiences from what you've gone through and showing them, hey, there's more ways to do this, and also making the most out of the opportunity that you have. Like, yeah, you're a teacher, but you're so much more than that, and you can do more than that. Like, some people are like, yeah, I want to be famous, I want to do all this, I want to see all the brightest lights, and it's freaking sweet that you've been able to do that. But you're also a teacher, and you're saying, I'm more than this. I'm a servant. And I've never heard somebody say they're a public servant as a teacher. And you know being able to kind of relate to those kids too. When you were younger, you didn't necessarily say that you were a problem child, but you had different things that were leading you to the wrong path, and wrestling kind of honed you in, kind of helped you become disciplined, and um, have a purpose. And so for you to be able to see that with kids who are getting into fights or whatever, and say, hey, come over here, let's do this, let's do it the right way, let's learn some stuff with this, instead of just swinging fists and getting into trouble, because there's more to life than that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And there's a lot of kids out there. I worked. I was a high school teacher for many years, and mainly upperclassmen. So I had juniors and seniors, and I love that age group. They're right on the cusp of kind of going into an adulthood phase, or at least the beginning stages of it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but the last few years, I went down to the middle school, and I switched from history to PE. Some of this has to do with the fight career stuff too, because I wanted more time to devote to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now I'm working with middle school PE, so a very different demographic. But it provides me so many opportunities to connect with kids and have conversations with them that
Mm.
doesn't happen in the classroom as much, because you're so busy
Right.
teaching content. And so um, it's been cool. And I feel like these middle school kids are like right on the cusp. Like they're at that age where they're gonna head in a direction going into high school. And if I could like change that for a few of them, like
Right.
it's a pretty cool when you do it, and you're successful in doing it. You're not always successful in doing it, but when you are successful. Like it's pretty cool to see when you see a kid that was probably heading in the wrong path, and you made you intervened in some ways that put him on the right path. And you can't take all the credit, obviously, but like you contributed to that kid's success, and you're like, it's pretty cool.
That's amazing. And then, with kids, I think you said you have 3 kids now. How is that? How has all your experiences kind of helped you in being a dad? And my wife is pregnant right now. She's due in March. It'll be our first kid. So I'll take any.
Congrats.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. We're having a boy. So
Oh man,
pretty.
my son was born in March as well, March
Oh, no way.
27th. So
Okay. Awesome.
might be a year older, but
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. How is what have been some of your favorite things about being a dad, and are those things that you're learning in fighting or in school, stuff that you're kind of teaching your kids at a younger age? And I don't want to get too far ahead of the question, but with mixed martial arts, there comes self-defense, and having 2 daughters, maybe that's something you want to teach them. How do you balance that without taking away their, I don't want to say their innocence, but you also want to make sure they're protected too. Is there like a fine line that if that makes sense? It's kind of a.
I get what you're saying, and that's
Yeah.
something I've thought about. Like, I haven't got my daughters into martial arts yet. My oldest is 8, and my
Okay.
youngest is she's almost 5.
Okay.
They play a lot of sports, a lot of traditional. My wife was a 3-sport athlete and college basketball player, so they kind of follow in a lot of her footsteps. We're on the softball field about 9 months out of the year. I feel like basketball is about to start up. She's in volleyball camp.
Wow.
I'm definitely gonna get her both of them into jiu-jitsu. I think that having self-defense as a woman, uh, especially probably is vital, and like they're gonna learn. They're gonna at least go to their blue belt. Like I
Mm-hmm.
want you to train long enough to be competent and have the muscle memory, because that's one of the things I always like. You see a lot of these like women's self-defense classes that gyms will host. And I honestly think it's bogus. And I
Right.
honestly think it's a disservice to women, because you're telling these women you pay this $299 special for this 4-day class, and you're going to come in, and even if they're teaching good stuff, which half the time they're not, but
Right.
let's pretend that they are, uh, you're not going to build muscle memory.
Right.
And if you don't build muscle memory, and then you put yourself in a situation, or you don't put yourself in the situation, but the situation gets put on you
Right.
to
Right.
where it's fight or flight, like, it's chaos, and you don't have muscle memory. Like, good luck remembering what you learned in a seminar 4 years ago.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
so for me, it's like, be honest about like what they need to acquire to be able to have self-defense. And that's like a few years of jujitsu,
Mm-hmm.
like a few solid years of jujitsu, couple times a week, to even if we have to kind of go on and off between their normal sports stuff, like, and then they'll be competent, and they'll have confidence as a result. But
Mm.
I've never been the one to like want to push them into wrestling or martial arts really in general. What's up, girl? I'm doing an interview. Are you guys ready? All right, tell mom I'll be right out. We're going to Moana 2 comes out today.
Ooh. Okay.
So
That'll be
my
fun.
kids are out of school, so we're taking them to go see Moana 2.
Oh, I love that. Well, cool, man. I won't keep you any longer. I really much appreciate this conversation. I took a ton of notes, and I think a lot of people will be able to get something out of it as well. And that's kind of the goal, like I said, to sharpen other people. And you have a mentality, you have a history, you have had a life that has showed that resilience and what it takes and what it means to keep going even when things get tough. And it's really cool that you're in a position where you can teach kids that, you can teach your daughters that, and your son. So it's really awesome, man. You're an inspiration. Well, we're rooting for you, and we're excited to see what happens next in your career.
Hey, man, I appreciate talking to you, and you're a CO, so I got mad respect for you.
Thanks, man.
And you
Yeah,
seem like one of the good ones, so.
I try. Somebody's got to do it, right? You
Yeah,
might as
somebody
well.
does.
Yeah, life's too short to not try. Give your best. Be a good one.
100%.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, if you ever find yourself in Central Minnesota, hit me up. We'll take you out on the lakes or something. Maybe do some fishing or.
NCAAs are coming to Minnesota. I want to say it's 2028. Funny side note, I was going to be in Minnesota for the NCAAs in 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and or whatever year COVID, 2020 was COVID.
Right. Yeah.
And they canceled it the week of we had saved all year for it. And we were like getting ready to fly out the next week, and then COVID hit and they canceled it. And so anyway, me and my buddies who had been planning this trip, that got canceled, we saw they're heading back to Minnesota, or they're going to finally make it to Minnesota for the NCAA championships. And so we already started our group chat planning it. So I'll let you know when I'm there. It might not be a couple more years though.
That's all right. That'd be awesome, man, for sure.
All right, man. Well,
All
good
right, but
talking to you.
yes, thank you again. Enjoy Moana too.
Yes.
See
Later.
you, man.